Winter doesn't have anything.
No, winter has one.
Okay. I'll check anyway.
It should be in there, and if not, you can check the email.
Oh.
But let me just go down here.
Views.
No.
WJ?
Oh, winter.
No, that's Willie.
Yeah, that's Willie.
Schneider. That's it.
Schneider, yeah.
Okay.
I wish my parents had more
Students. It's amazing to me that our students are. I mean, most of our questions.
Oh, yeah.
They don't see this as like foundation to that. Really, it pisses me off. It's a real problem.
The sound.
How did you have each color around?
It's because they're getting smaller and smaller. Human geographers are like size.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Okay, one more time, just because it's the afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Right. So I welcome you all to the fifth and final panel of our Black Geography Symposium. And I'm very excited about this one, and I will start off as we have before, just recapping what some of the thoughts and questions were. So it's titled, The Capaciousness of Black Liberation. In this panel, we consider the forms of radical, foundation-questioning politics that takes blackness and racial capitalism as central to praxis, both action and reflection. Angela Davis argues that radical politics for our time has to be capacious, both drawing from struggles past and connecting the Black radical tradition to other struggles of the oppressed, including Davis's imagination of animals and environments. These are fundamentally geographical concerns, as is the spatial metaphor of a capacious form of politics. So we use this to pose the proposition in our central theme here that Black geographies makes possible a capacious form of liberation as a praxis. So today's presenters are Matt Miller, far end of the table. He's coming from USC today. He's currently pursuing his PhD in urban planning and development His dissertation explores the geography of Black creative and entrepreneurship in the United States, both broadly and with a particular focus on the South Los Angeles communities in Inglewood and Lamert Park. Next, we have Winter Ray Schneider. Winter Ray Schneider is a proud mother and doctoral candidate in the Department of History at UCLA. She works on the politics of historical representation, law, colonialism, and reparations framed within the historical landscapes of the Caribbean and Latin America. She is currently completing her dissertation, Debts of Independence, Personhood, and Property in Haiti and the French Empire. Next, we have Michael Dumas. Michael J. Dumas is an assistant professor in the Graduate School of Education and the Department of African American Studies at the University of California, Berkeley. His research sits at the intersections of the cultural politics of Black education, the cultural political economy of urban education, and the maturity of Black childhoods. Here we have Savannah Kilner, also a J. Savannah J. Kilner is a doctoral candidate in the Department of Gender Studies at UCLA. Her dissertation, Pride and Property, Queer Settler Colonialism, Blackness, and the Landed Politics of Solidarity, asks how practices and imaginings of queer space interact with multiple overlapping modes of dispossession in the U.S. colonial present. Billy Wright here, also a J. Billy Jamal Wright is an assistant professor of geography at the Florida State University. He conducts research in the areas of Black geographies, urban geography, and cultural geography. And last but not least, we have the inimitable Latoya E. Eves is an assistant professor in the Global Studies and Human Geography Department. Her research focuses on Black resilience, survivability, and space making as central sites of geographic knowledge, with specific attention to the American and global South, sexualities, religious and spiritual practices, political movements, and state and legal systems. She is also the founder and chair of the AAG Black Geography Special Group. Please join me in welcoming her.
Awesome. Well, how's everyone doing?
Great.
Good. Got lunch in your stomach. That's going good. All right. So thanks again for the introduction, Kaylee, and thank you all for your time and attention. It's been a capacious experience being here the last almost 24 hours, listening and learning from all of you. I want to say that, you know, I'm really grateful for the Berkeley Geography Department for putting this on. I really, you know, this is actually the definition of high treason for me to be here during this weekend. You know, my reunion this weekend is at Stanford across the pond, but I'm very happy to be here instead. I think this is a duty of mine to share my perspective on these things. So, you know, I want to do something a little different than I think I've experienced so far in this conference, in that I want to inspire us, the we people in this room, as well as everyone watching here, to communicate and collaborate with a shared understanding of what Black geographies are possible of. And so I want to start with the question: what do filmmakers and designers in South Los Angeles, drawing on Afrofuturist world building, have in common with two Black and Chinese restaurateurs making Black tacos, have in common also with muralists revitalizing Philadelphia's poorest neighborhoods? Next slide. I think they practice varying degrees of a concept that I think has been lost and diminished in our discourse on Black liberation, and that is the beautiful, urgent politics of what I call Black imaginative placemaking. Now, before I tell you more about these cases, I want to, can everyone hear me in the back and on live stream? Okay, cool. I just want to, before I get into these cases, I want to define some terms, sort of let everyone know what I mean by certain things. And so, go ahead, next slide. So I have 5 terms on here that you'll see in here that are ranging from imagination, civic imagination, creativity, Black placemaking, and creative placemaking. And these terms have been the source of my inspiration, a lot of my work exploring race, arts, and economic development in South Los Angeles. But I want to say, in studying these concepts, I found that despite these overlaps in some of the ways we use them, there's some really important differences that need to be reckoned with before we move forward. So the main thing that I think I want to say about these is that there tends to be a sort of neutering of cultural production and dividing that from the political urgency of the challenges that we face in our communities. And I think that that's a false divide, particularly when we look at, creative placemaking is one in urban planning that has gotten a lot of buzz and attention, but really, a lot of times we in the excitement around how we get artists and community members to work together, we overlook the ways in which we can reproduce racism, for lack of better words. And so, maybe that's the right word. So, just want to say that's the main thing I want to pull out from this, is that there's ways to link these a lot better. And and that's the last thing, creativity. That word has been stretched so far and thin, but today I just want to, tether that to three forms of creativity, which is art, visual art, food, culture, and design. So, next slide. Thank you. So, why? There's a lot of principles I could have drawn on for this, but I want to sort of use 4 principles that I think can help us operationalize this idea that Black imaginative placemaking is necessary, and not just for our futures, but the futures, I think, of everyone. So, firstly, freedom is co-constituted intimately with the idea of development. So there are, especially as an urban planner, there's a lot of sort of animus when I say I focus on economic development. People think that, hey, you just want to reproduce, copy-paste that sort of capitalist orientation onto Black communities. And I think that you have to be very careful about what you mean by development. And so development, to me, is, as Amartya Sen, the Nobel Peace Prize winning political philosopher, defined it as freedom. Simple. Freedom in a variety of different forms: political, economic, social. There's also another thinker, Martha Nussbaum, who has a complementary kind of way of thinking of development as capabilities. And so my simple way of this first principle is just that development is really the process of freeing unfreed peoples and places. And so the second principle here is space, as we've been talking about here, is culturally encoded through the imagination. And so space is never neutral. Space is, through ideas that we've learned from George Lipsitz with the Black and White Spatial Imaginary, that people have different ways of viewing space as good or bad. And there isn't really a good or bad. There's how we use space and how you use space. And so I think that's the second principle I want to elaborate on a little bit. Thirdly, we probably don't need to dwell on this, but creativity is, in my view, the apex of human development. It is your mark on the world. It is your self-actualization, is what Maslow would call it, in sort of a hierarchy of needs. And lastly, that reality is socially constructed. I think in Black liberation spaces, we tend to focus on the ways in which material outcomes and production is the modes to understand freedom, and I think we need to revisit that. And so now that I've said all that, I want to move into these cases. So next slide. Oh, actually, this is one here. So summing up all that, my argument is that Black imaginative placemaking is not only necessary for shaping Black realities and Black freedoms, but for realizing the fullest potential of every soul that harbors anti-Blackness. All right, so 3 interventions here, and they're kind of on the spectrum, not necessarily in order because I was rushing a little bit with this, but next slide. All right, so the first one, community muralism. Anybody in here familiar with Philadelphia Mural Arts Project? Okay, or Mural Arts Philadelphia? One person? Okay, well, that's a lot to learn then. So founded in 1984, originally as the Anti-Graffiti Network, the Mural Arts Philadelphia is often viewed as the poster child for creative placemaking. And in this discussion, I'd like to also posit that it is a form of Black imaginative placemaking that we haven't really labeled as such. And so on here you see youth muralists working on this wall. From the very beginning, youth that were sort of stigmatized and pinged as juveniles and graffiti sort of delinquents were brought into this experimental at the time program to give them amnesty and allow them to actually paint murals instead. And that sounds simple in retrospect, but at the time, murals were actually not even viewed as like a valid form of public art. It was a very sort of, at the time, avant-garde way to sort of get to deal with this issue. And so, next slide. Here are some of the outputs that we've seen over the past 30 years they've been able to do. What you see here is a sort of classical nature to it. It draws you in. It allows you to sort of see yourself from the community's perspective in these murals. And initially, it was very sort of nascent. People didn't have an exact methodology, but Mural Arts Philadelphia has sort of expanded under the leadership of Jane Golden, I should add, expanded their methodology to be what they say is an 120-step process to engage the community around what their needs are, what their sort of angst are socially and economically and otherwise, and figure out what kind of mural actually would be useful to address those needs. And so, next slide. This one on the right here, anyone recognize this guy's face? Yes? Okay. So it may be, his suit might be throwing you off, but that's Dr. J, the NBA player. And they decided to sort of take him and put him into a suit and give him sort of the dignity of being a businessman. And a lot of times athletes are not viewed that way. And so I thought that was a beautiful start to this history. And down here you see a celebration. Do people recognize these people at all? There we go, The Roots. So The Roots had a recently had a dedication with a mural through a festival there as well. So it's gotten really big. I've included mostly black faces on this, but they've had Prince Charles from Britain come and sort of like explore murals all around Philly. Philly's become the mural capital of the world because of this organization. Thank you. Next slide. So this is just a quick map of like North Philly mostly, but it's all over. I mean, it's pretty amazing. Next slide. So I just want to say, before talking about this next example that's closer to home for me, I'm not romanticizing these solutions. I think that there's definitely challenges with it, but for the sake of time, I'm just telling you the highlight reel, and we can get into the things that can be problematized. So the second example. So, you know, I'm wrestling with how to sort of situate this example, but I'll just tell you the history. So this organization or this restaurant, Bill's House of Tacos, one of my students made me aware of this place a few months ago, and it has a really interesting history because it's one of the oldest black-owned restaurants in the U.S. In Los Angeles, and the founder actually passed away, a black man who started it on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, and he had a sort of Chinese woman named Eva Chan who worked with him from the very beginning, and when he passed away, sold it to her. And people were like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen with this? But she actually kept the restaurant true to the original recipe. This is, I don't know if you all recognize this kind of taco, but this is the kind of taco I grew up eating. I didn't even know this was called like a black taco until like I saw that. I was like, what? Like they have a restaurant on this? So I went there and met the owner. She's so polite and nice. The other beautiful thing I mentioned about this story is that in the '92 uprising riots, the restaurant had been burned down. And the woman who owned it actually knew who did it. And she didn't pursue charges. She knew that this person was a sort of angry youth that needed a place to sort of, to vent his frustration. And so they rebuilt the place. The community has sort of, as you see here, painted murals and things all in it to sort of signify that this is our place. So next one. Gosh, I wish I had more time for this one, but I don't. I will say that earlier, seeing Corbin talk about Afrofuturism, and I asked her the question around, are there intentional ways to work with designers and planners to sort of reshape our environments? And I'm working alongside with these people in the Merck Park that have done this. next slide, we can just sort of like show you the visuals. There's a process to this. It isn't just high-tech people coming in, sort of erasing things that are now. There's all sorts of modalities that have been created from this. Vision Lemur, which shows you different ways. Play Lemur, using the environment as an instrument. It's one of the jazz sort of like hubs of LA. Next slide. Garden Lemur, sorry, the Garden Lemur. You can learn about, that they want to, they sort of created a vision where you could learn about your environment as well. Share Lemur, so this is a ride-sharing program that they came up with in concert with a sort of a person that does car design. I can elaborate on that more as well. But basically the goal here is to show you different examples of ways that we can create belonging, and that it's not just a, it's not just a project in social production, but social construction, and the arts and culture can help us get there. So, thank you.
Hey everybody. Can
Sorry, I'm just getting your slides up.
Off. Good. Not good. That's fine. Okay. I'll speak up as well. Good afternoon, everybody. It is such a pleasure to be here and an honor. Thank you so much to the organizers. I love the format. Working for everybody. So I'm going to speak to the prompts for our panel from my research, but I realized in the process of doing this that talking about my research was also talking about what Black geography as a field has done for me since my early days as a student, and how it has informed my thinking, how I arrive at study and at struggle. So my talk is informed by and also streamed with references to words and other people that I'm not quoting explicitly. And I'm going to present this in frames, and it's mainly to help me think about my own work, sort of in lieu of having an overarching title. So, memory work in plantation futures and plantation texts. In 1897, Haitian writer and statesman Frédéric Marcelin wrote, "There is no Haitian who does not know the history of our debt of 1825. There is not a one for whom Charles X's ordinance is not an unpleasant memory." Later, in a memoir about his childhood, he would write that the memory of French domination springs up at every step in the Haitian countryside. The debt of 1825 that Marcelin refers to is when ousted white French colonists were awarded an indemnity and reparations, really the first case, for property and land and enslaved people they had lost during the Haitian Revolution. The indemnity imposed a debt of 150 million francs as a condition for recognizing Haiti's state sovereignty, and it was evaluated in 2004 at around $21 billion. Marcelin's vantage points allowed him to theorize the condition of Haitian sovereignty in relation to French capital. His most damning critiques are reserved for a scandalous recapitalization of the debt in the end of 19th century. Haitian memory. My dissertation looks at one region in Haiti, the Artibonite Valley, and the ways that different ideas and practices of land ownership give way to historical narratives of sovereignty, privilege, and belonging. This is a, you can just say it. So this is actually a late 18th century map of the region where I work. This is a colonial map, but it was drawn up, like actually right at the beginning of the Haitian Revolution, but the beginning was in the north and this is south. So this is a really detailed property map and was used later by colonists. So I use oral histories and historical ethnography to center the ways that Haitian memory moves in the historical landscapes that it inhabits. Before starting my PhD, I was a dancer in such spaces, and so my initial research questions were driven by the rhythms of Black communities enacting the rituals of choreographed, spatialized historical memory and generative decolonial imagination. The rural spaces that Haitians know from have been carved out of inherited indigenous, colonial, and national era landscapes. self-conscious, politically black decolonial imagination is shaped within these historical and contemporary agricultural spaces where state emphasis on large-scale property and agriculture continually dispossesses patient families of land they have settled, both through insurgent and legal means. Rural Haiti's spatial memory reveals that the different histories affixed to and generated by Haitian landscapes are messy and overlapping and far-reaching. Haitian decolonial imagination repurposes disenfranchising narratives into tools for reconstructing and empowering kin and family above all else. A huge chunk of my research is also 19th century land documents from the same region, and to me it seems clear that the Haitian ancestors, those who survived the Middle Passage, French colonization, and the Haitian Revolution, were making the same moves, building from the bones of colonial property in order to reconstruct their families and jockey for position in the Haitian state to empower to find empowering forms of personhood and belonging. So in trying to understand and historicize Haiti's first generations in their struggle to constitute themselves as sovereign, my research process turned to historicizing Haitian space and land in what has been described as a historical vacuum of the 19th century by some scholars of the and it also became a forensic process as information on rural Haiti is embedded within French family and government papers that were instrumental in establishing claims to the payout itself, a repair from the Haitian Revolution, what colonists dubbed historical. This is one such way of getting this information is from these microfilm French family papers. Processes of possession. On February 2nd, 1828, an inventory was drawn up of the personal property of the Count Alexandre Gamache, who had passed away at the age of 85 years in his home in Paris. Born in the Atlantic Valley, he was a militiaman in the town of Berkeley, and he owned 2 cotton and indigo plantations, also in the same region. He fought against the Haitian Revolution before fleeing for Jamaica and later returned to France. In the inventory of his possessions, the Count's papers are listed first, and first among these are listed 18 documents which, the inventory reads, can be used to claim the indemnity to which he was entitled as a former colonist of Saint Domingue. While the inventory does not say which papers were in this set of documents, from the Count's correspondence before his death, they could have included a mixture of birth and baptismal records for his children, his father's land titles to multiple concessions, and notarized inventories of his properties, records of purchase and of sale, and perhaps receipts from his commercial brokers in Bordeaux showing the value of cotton and indigo for his state. Whiteness and as the law. In the indemnity claims of white colonists, especially those who lived or were property holders in the article roots that I studied, the practice of culling colonial papers was central to establishing their claims to property for the commission in charge of the indemnity's liquidation. These documents connect the past lives of Saint Domingue's colonists to the endeavor of proving legal personhood in France. In addition to demonstrating the worth of property during the years it was acquired or owned, documentation showing how many enslaved people colonists owned, for example, or how much land, contributed to a calculus of value over 20 years after the Revolution. In this calculus, documentation also demonstrated the capability of certain colonists to manage their property expertly, thus contributing to its valuation for indemnification. Colonists' meticulous documentation of their indemnification claims, which I assessed in the family papers and also the National Archives in France and everywhere, represents a twin construction of family lines and claims to property. As they established their claims as rights holders, les ayants, property and personhood became a newly refashioned amalgam in the era of restoration in France, or in the law of restoration. In this way, Saint Domingue's colonists successfully created for themselves a modern legal white identity, construed as historically legitimate and as a historically legitimate right to property, drawing from and in turn buttressing an ideology of white superiority that racialized and dehistoricized Haitians and the Haitian state as illegitimate because they're black and as black. White colonists cast themselves as victims of black violence and dispossession, while the French bureaucracy stepped into its role as the repairer of historical accidents, establishing legal personhood of some while denying that of others. The act of archival reconstruction that claiming indemnity involved locates the institutionalization of whiteness within vindictive claims of authority over Haitian soil in the past, and over claims to the right to enjoy payouts for that property in perpetuity. Papers like those of the Count Banache were guarded by families and used to claim continuous payouts through the beginning of the 20th century. Thanks to changes in French inheritance law, this is possible in allowing them to do so. They allowed them to claim payouts as inheritance from the long dead but not forgotten colonists of Saint-Germain. So that's just an example. This is from someone's indemnity file that we used to claim. On historical amnesia. So far, this is a simple enough story to grasp. What is not accounted for is the role of historical amnesia in the intergenerational predatory relationship of French families to Haitian soil. Families who received payouts into the 20th century have completely reoriented their histories to exclude Haiti's colonization entirely, and the French state has also delegitimized the whole debt narrative by not recognizing reparations claims. Historical amnesia was produced out of the bureaucratic and social processes of establishing legal whiteness, and the process of establishing a legal precedent for victimhood and indemnification of colonial properties also triggered a, quote, forgetting of Haiti. While whiteness, writ large, is a metaphor for power, this project seeks to historicize a moment in time in which legal privilege protecting and embodied money inherited whiteness rooted itself in black space. Indemnification or reparations as a legal and archival process reveals an intergenerational relationship of French families to Haitian soil, a process that established a, quote, legal precedent to recognize the inherited victimhood in the eyes of the state and empire of those directly responsible for and benefiting from ongoing forms of anti-black violence, dispossession, and racialized property ownership in Haiti. The 1825 indemnity was referenced as such by white colonists who claimed to receive reparations they claimed and received reparations for their lost property across the French Antilles and the Indian Ocean after the general abolition of slavery in the French Empire. So you can see it's pointed to you, well, you did this for them, so we did this for you. Okay, so for thinking about how Black geographies makes possible Haitian's form of reparations practice, I wanted to turn to redress, repair, and bearing witness to property in particular. Black geographies unmask and denaturalize the historical processes that built global white supremacy in this specific instance on personal rights to private property. Because of the amnesia surrounding white culpability, the story is only possible to tell from Haiti, where generations of Haitian families preserve, practice, index, and transform the memory of abuse within the various sites of their creation and dispossession. It holds historical reality as inherently relational, even for those who have willfully forgotten their histories and inheritances. It informs a place-driven, multidisciplinary research agenda with the kinds of collaborative, in-depth critical historical work Black geographies has generated on the legacies of British slave ownership, for example, via Catherine Hall and associates. And in turn, it can offer evidence for new movements for repair and redress. It is a capacious enough frame that can hold people in relation to one another at best, showing white people to ourselves as constituted free property, and can create a deliberate framework for repair for post-property imagination, for material and epistemology.
Michael, you don't have slides, do you?
No. Thank you for putting me on this panel as an education professor. We're in a applied field, so a lot of our work is not always theoretical, and it always has to respond to conditions on Monday morning in some way or another. My work probably tends to be more theoretical, but I take the responsibility of actually making those applications because those are the people that I want to be in conversation with. But it makes it a little more difficult because you have to actually say, well, what can we do with this? But the field of urban education prides itself on actually having a spatial analysis. In the sense of urban, the notion of the urban and urban political economy becomes a way for us to at least make the claim that conditions outside of schools, social, political, economic processes impact things that go on within schools. And so in some ways, we are somewhat arrogant about that because we look at educators who don't think about urban education as thinking about schools being having the capacity to make all the changes for young people, right? And that you only have to attend to what you do in that school building. So we think we're really doing something. But it turns out, obviously, that through the lens of Black geography, that you find that most spatial analyses render Black people ungeographic, as explained, or as Christina Sharp has written, as no citizen, as lives lived under occupation with no state or nation to protect us. Now, I'll come back to this in a second because that's hard for educators to hear, because we believe that our schools are certainly places that protect children and that welcome all children. And so it really already defies, a Black geographic analysis already defies our sense of what the geography of the school is. And most of you, all of you have done schools. And so you can only think about your own memories in schools and think about what the geography, all the ways you can think about the geographies of those schools. And I'll talk about a few of those. I have focused on school segregation, not because I wanted to, but because it's the primary site within which the discourse on Black education has really occurred in the last 100 years or so. You almost can't avoid it in terms of the imagination not only of Black folks in terms of what they thought schools of segregation and immigration might do, and then actually are growing critiques by the 1980s, if not before, but definitely the 1980s in the North, that what we thought it was going to do, it didn't do. And also the kind of fetishization of the white folks' fetishization of integration and what it would mean for them in terms of kind of cleansing themselves of all sorts of histories of racial terror. And so I reluctantly turned to school segregation. But the thing is, white people love school segregation. You can get funding for that. And so if I had the project as one on Black education or Black educational imaginations, which was the concept that I was using, that would have gotten the funding. But school segregation, I remember had people clutch pearls. That it's only recently that I've actually thought about that in a conscious way through the lens of Black geographies and thinking about what are three ways that we might think about a Black geography of school desegregation and school integration. And the one is obvious. I mean, it's the federal state policies and that basically created the conditions where you had, and not only federal and state policies, but also white acts of terror in spaces that basically disenfranchised Black folks from certain spaces, and also from the resources that came from being in the more economically valued parts of the city. And I say that instead of saying segregation, because a lot of times in that argument, it's like, oh yes, so Black people are segregated. And that's not really the issue. It's really that in those spaces, they took the resources away from those Black spaces. So segregation was not the primary problem. It was actually what they did to Black people, because that's what Black people were. So those create spaces of value and will also not give them resources. So I didn't focus on it that way. So the second way I was thinking is about movements of Black bodies across cities, from Black home places to largely hostile and unwelcoming white claims territories of the city. So that's not something I think we've done in education. What does that mean to kind of analyze that? And so even very personally, this idea of living an hour or so away by bus from the school, and if you miss that bus, you have to take public transportation, and that means you have to walk your little feet, and you're little, you're a child, right? And you're walking your little feet in this strange neighborhood after you get off that second bus, and that hours of a steep hill up to the school, you're sweating, and then there's people knowing you don't live there, you don't belong there. So there's all these ways that I haven't even begun to do all that analysis, right? And so that's just not the way that school desegregation is even thought about in education. And third, we have to think about the violence that's inflicted on Black children's bodies. So Shakara, her name was only said once in the Spring Valley school. Black girl was dragged out of her seat in the video. And I always like to name Montrevious Thomas because he lived, so there's no video. But he was body slammed by a school security officer in Georgia 3 times. He complained that his leg hurt, and they said, "Oh, you're just complaining." Put him on the bus. Turns out his leg was amputated later that day. 13 years old. And so again, that's another space of geography. And then another area I mentioned is in school discipline, obviously, more broadly. But then I want to think specifically about this concept. One of my doctoral students is writing about willful defiance. That actually is a category in which you can be,